I'm old-fashioned, so I address you as comrades, the old style, not Lord Mayor, Lot Minister, comrades. Let's get back to that sort of stuff. It is a great pleasure to be here. Let me do my thanks first for Tina, who's been running like a mad thing the last 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 days, 2 hours, sorting all this out. Really glad to be here. The reason I'm really here is Pat Letwidge. All of us in this life just depend upon people helping you out at the right time. Pat helped me out. I got stuck with this big European grant. I had to do a small city. We found Cork. I thought, Christ, who do I know there? Pat helped me out. He brought me over. He showed me the place. He got people in the room. I'm now the world's leading expert on Cork, outside Cork. So Pat... And in my view, you've got to help your mate. So he helped me. I'm helping him. Thank you. Having said all that, it's a bit of a problem, really. You know, I'm standing between you and lunch. The time is all gone. I'm the last speaker. All has already been said, but as Mo Udall, who never got elected to the American presidency, said to me once, Michael, always remember, everything has been said, but not yet everybody has said it, so just say it again. In fact, I thought I'd come to the wrong conference. I thought they're not going to like this, not going to be interested. You can all have a little sleep while I bang on. But I was really pleased, apart from that being a great talk in a great city by Jose, where he ended up was on governance. What I'm going to talk about is what I know. What I know, you can call it governance. It's actually about politics. I'm going to talk about the political economy and economic performance. And I'm going to talk about a project I did. I've worked for European Commission, UK government for many, many years, advising on urban policy, what to do, where you went wrong, what you're going to do better next time. There's nothing new under the sun. It all come back. Don't trust in acronyms. It's all dead simple stuff, okay? You know it, I know it, just do it. This is a report which I did for something called SBOM, which is a big European program, intellectually dysfunctional, I think. But we did a nice piece of work, and we tried to ask a very simple question, which is dear to my heart. Why should the capitals get all the bloody money? Well, to answer that question and to say deconcentrate investment and decentralize responsibility, you can't just say that. You've got to get some evidence that if you do, you increase your economic performance. And I think we did a piece of work which actually showed for the first time there's a very clear relationship between political economy, governance, and economic performance. And quite simply, if you deconcentrate investment and decentralize decision-making, you get more high-performing cities, you get a more high-performing national economy, and you get a more successful European economy. QED. Do not listen to free market economists. Do not listen to agglomeration economists. Trust yourself, you know. And the great thing about Cork is, it's a good example. I not only like you, I've got some figures showing that you help me. It's 3 minutes gone. And I've lost my water. When I go to really posh conference, I get a glass here and have to drink out of a bottle. It's all right, I'm a Scouser, we do that as well, you know. Sorry, I'm going to be a professional a moment and say very long words about very important things. Seriously, 5 questions. What do we do and how do we do it? That's not very interesting. I think 3 questions of interest to you. What are the key messages about urban performance that I've discovered looking across 155 European cities in 31 European countries? Secondly, what are the policy messages for different kinds of people about economic performance and government? And thirdly, I think it's patronizing to come to a place and not at least have a go at say something about what I take to be your position, and then you can tell me I got it wrong or whatever. So I'm finally going to take a punt on basically challenges and issues for Ireland and Cork, given what I'm about to tell you. What are we trying to do? We're actually trying to answer the question, what is the relative contribution that different sized cities make to the European economy? And Jose has already said, don't worry about, as I say, don't worry about size, it doesn't matter. Every place can make a contribution, but we can make cuts in size. And I was trying to make the question of how can second-tier cities contribute, yeah? Second question, who's actually punching their weight in Europe and nationally? Which cities are really doing well? Thirdly, we're in the 5th year of a crisis that may or may not be the worst crisis we've had for a long time. It's certainly bad. What has been the territorial impact and what are the implications of that crisis for urban Europe, for cities, and frankly, for Cork? And then the obvious question we need to know, well, lovely Michael, who's going to do what better or differently in future? Okay. To answer the question, what are these second tiers? I don't really care what the definition is. Basically, I've taken 31 countries in Europe, which is the EU 27 plus ESPON. I've said, okay, let's look at the capital cities, and then let's look at the next largest cities below them, whose performance really matters to the national economy. And the Minister and Mike went on a lot about data. I have got the richest database you ever want to find on 155 cities, on X indicators over X periods of time. I'm not going to bore you a lot with that today. But you do need, if you're going to persuade a politician to do what he knows he needs to do, you've got to say, Minister, there's the facts. And we've collected all this data upon agreed European Union OECD boundaries, and again to speak the bleeding obvious, as Mrs. Faulty says, and the Minister spoke the bleeding obvious, this is about the city region. No point talking about administrative boundaries, small places, cities. It's the functional urban economy. I'm actually talking about real economies. I better speed up. The EU is very concerned about this because it's concerned about what's the story across Europe, what's the difference in performance between different kinds of places, what is the gap between the capitals and other cities, and what's a direction of change, because they get a lot of pressure, particularly in the East, to invest all money in the capital, because the argument is you need to have a successful capital to drive a national economy. Yes, you do, necessary but not sufficient. They are saying, actually, are any member states talking about this? Is any country discussing the issue of where should we invest scarce resources in a crisis? Or should we just do what we've always done, and in a sense, to him or he that have or she that have shall be given? You know, obviously doubling because we've got to, you know. And then the next kind of question, you know, in the different member states, what's the debate? Is it all about cohesion, which is important? Or is it about economic competitiveness, which is important also? Is there any explicit concern about this? And are member states actually having any concern with the kind of territorial, urban, spatial impact of their policies? And are any countries across Europe trying to think more about how they're going to raise their performance? Greater targeting, helping them increase capacity, more powers and resources, fewer constraints. That last set of questions is enormously significant in Ireland and Cork, where you're over-centralised, underdeveloped, and lack capacity at local level. And the story of Cork is a triumph against the bloody odds, actually. It has done well despite governance frameworks. That's my tale. So, God, I've got to get on. I'm too slow. Anyway, what I'm trying to do is test the argument. If you deconcentrate investment and decentralise responsibilities, and you give resources to local governments, you'll get better performing urban national economies. That, in fact, if you have more good second-tier high-performing cities, you'll increase national European economy. What I'm arguing is this is not a conflict or antagonism between capital cities and the rest. What I'm really arguing, it's a win-win, zero, not a zero-sum argument. Yeah? And free market agglomeration economists will always tell you, well, you either back the capital or you back somewhere else. My judgment is, technically speaking, that's bollocks, and you just need to get both to grow. It's also the case that performance of cities, they have to do what they can, and you should do what you can where you are in your patch, but national policy is really dramatically affected. And when the Minister was talking about the global players down the road, and Tyndall and CIT and the farmer and all of that, you've got to connect to that, because I have a very simple take on this. I live in and love Liverpool. I've written about its renaissance and performance. I wrote about its crisis. I can tell you, economic growth does not guarantee social cohesion. But I can absolutely tell you it's very difficult to redistribute poverty. And I lived in a city which for 20 years was, frankly, technically speaking, virtually on its arse economically, and we were at each other's throats. Not until we got a little bit of growth could we even ask the question. So do not think that social cohesion and economic competitiveness are mutually exclusive strategies. The most successful cities in Europe are in Northern Europe, Scandinavia, high state spending, high taxation, high public investment, high education, high innovation, high performance. There's a clear relationship. It's not automatic, but unless you think about the sources of creativity and innovation and wealth, you'll be struggling to redistribute a shrinking pie in an age of austerity. You don't want to be there. I may never get this talk finished. The critical success factors. Mike, we had a chat last night. You know, in 1992, because I had to say something, I invented the entrepreneurial city. In 2004, I was on another platform. I call it the competitive city. He has his learning city. Joan has a healthy city. Really now, you know, the smart city. I know the bloke that invented smart specialization. He was the advisor to Jonas Hahn. He's going to inform everything about European urban policy. I know Phil McCann. He's a mate of mine. He doesn't know what it means. And you know what it means? Every place is somewhere, and every place has got some assets, and every place has got some people, and the best thing that place could do is get those people together to mobilize the assets to make it a better place to be in. That is smart specialization. You know that, you do it. In my view, the drivers of success that you need to focus upon are innovation in product and process, economic and social diversity, human capital, connectivity, place quality, by which I mean social cohesion and sustainability, as well as everything else. And frankly, I think strategic governance capacity. Politics matters. And in a global economy, territorial governments will matter more. In other words, you've got to get your act together, which you've done very well in Cork, and fight your own corner. What's the evidence? Well, I went to a lot of places, read a lot of stuff, got a huge database, interviewed loads of people at Europe, national, local, regional, e-questionnaire, and 9 case studies, one of which was Cork. Different kinds of second-tier cities. They're very different. Leeds, Lyon, Turin, Munich, Barcelona, Katowice, Timisoara, Tampere. They're very different. But what they have in common is they're not capital cities. Actually, many of them have made a huge economic contribution to the national economy. It's often under-recognized and undervalued. And I subscribe very strongly to the OECD analysis. Where do you get most growth from, both in a boom and in austerity? You get it from the middle. Because the top, you've had so much growth out of your best cities, they don't offer you a hell of a lot more. And at the very bottom of the urban hierarchy, you're not going to get much growth. But if you look at the data, the growth comes from the places in the middle. And that's what I'm really talking about. What came out of the report? I have to say I've become famous for saying blindingly obvious things. But, you know, somebody's got to say them. First of all, the performance of cities is absolutely crucial to national economic competitiveness. If you don't have successful cities, you won't have successful economies. It's blindingly obvious, but, you know, ministers come and go, civil servants come and go. You've got to say, is that part of your thinking and psyche? Secondly, it's absolutely clear that the economic contribution of capitals and second-tier cities varies. If you look across Europe, it's absolutely clear that capitals dominate the national economies in terms of GDP, but the gap isn't the same in all countries, and the gap is changing. So it's not for all time, and it's not immutable. It's obviously clear, and I'll give you some evidence, that capital cities dominate the national economy much more in the East than in the West. And that suggests to me, if you're looking for a significant economic performance, you don't have a dominant capital. And you're sitting there thinking, we've got the most dominant capital outside France. What would it look like if the relationship were different? The evidence is through the boom that many second-tier cities made a growing increase in contribution to national performance, and actually I'm going to show you in some places the second-tier cities, including your good selves, actually beat the capital. I'm going to run you a pile of figures now. If you can't see them, don't worry. What it will say, the last set are heavily centralized countries performing rather badly, and there's a huge gap between the capital and the second tier. I'm going to start with a set of cities which are in the most successful economies in Europe, and you're going to find, quelle surprise, they have very successful second cities. The most successful economy in Europe, come on, Germany. The most decentralized economy in Europe, Germany. The most powerful cities in Europe, Germany. Okay, on your left-hand side, Germany, you know, most successful country in Europe, more successful second-tier cities than anywhere else, you know. We have a colleague here from Graz, Austria actually, some relationship as well. In Italy, da-di-da, in Netherlands, Belgium. And there you go. I bet you never believed. I was talking to Pat about it. Actually, Ireland comes out as the highest performing national economy, and Cork beats Dublin. Yay! Now we think this is something with FDI and profits being repatriated. You've got to take this, but whether that's absolutely true or whether the economists would fiddle around, it's really very interesting, you know? Those countries, on the whole, apart from Ireland, are relatively decentralized. They're either federal or they've got powerful regional things. What you're going to see, as we move from less centralized to more centralized, the economic performance goes down and the gap grows. Okay? There's Spain, regionalized, not bad, and the gap there's 5 to 20%, you know. There's France. I don't want to go through all of this. And then we're starting to move where the capital really dominates by 20 and 30%, you know, and that's in the middle bits. Poland is the most decentralized of all East European states and actually is one of the most successful. But as we get into Hungary, Romania, Lithuania, Greece, you're beginning to find national GDP is low, the capital dominates, they have very few successful second-tier cities. So it seems to me there's a relationship there between centralization, the capital dominance, and economic performance. And that's really dreadful. Okay, in the boom, the nice decade, remember it? I bought me cars and suits then. Still wearing it, cannoli. No, this is a new one. Because I knew I'd be seeing Pat, you see. In the boom, a lot of second-tier cities actually, in the boom, contributed more than the capitals. Look, Germany, the red is the capital city. In all those countries, in the boom, the second-tier cities actually paid off. In other words, if you invest, you get a return. This is an argument about investment, not territorial fairness or justice, or it ain't fair, why doesn't Cork get this, or why doesn't Limerick get that? This is an argument hard-nosed economists should at least argue with me about investment. And we're still doing well in a lot of those places, but the further east we will go, you'll find they didn't catch up because the east was putting all the eggs in one basket off the capital city. Governance matters. I'm now going to show you a picture so bloody complicated, you won't want to bother. What it actually shows is a trend line between economic performance and extent of centralization, from most centralized to least centralized, from the former East European heavily centralized to some through unitary centralized to some regionalized to some federal states. And if you can see that band going up like that, basically on the left-hand side, the cities, that shows all the cities and the countries, lower performing, more centralized. As you go up the performance level, less centralized. It's not absolutely perfect, and there are exceptions, okay? But there's a relationship there between how we run our state and what happens. Ten minutes. I'm going to speed up. Greater decentralization gets you greater productivity. You get numbers here. That's a correlation, and again it shows basically more decentralized, more productive countries and cities. I'm also going to show you something that will bother you a lot, because it's not only better economically, if you don't have such a big gap, it's fairer. I'm going to show you a table now which shows very clearly in the countries where the capitals grew more than the second-tier cities, regional inequality increased. Inequality got worse, not when the national economy did well, but when the capital city did better than the national economy. That's the real message. See it. Germany, the capital did not grow, and actually inequality declined in Germany. As we go right, we'll find that the national capital grew, and inequality grew. Now, Ireland is in the not very good end of that. So there's a relationship there. Well, Minister, it wouldn't only be more efficient if you invested in other places, it would also be fairer and would address the problem that you lot face. Okay, I'm going to really hurry along, sorry. What's it all mean? There's a real risk. We had a boom, we've got a bust. It's bad. It's worse here, it's worse, it's bad here, it's bad Spain, bad Greece. There's a real risk that all that investment that paid off and the second-tier cities grow will decline. There'll be competition for public and private sector investment, which will widen the gap within the second-tier cities, which we'll talk about, and competition will widen the gap between the second-tier cities and the capitals. That's a map showing you, again, what happened in the boom. Growth across Europe, strong growth in the Baltics, the Central Southeast Europe, steady growth in Western Europe, mostly in Southern Europe, and the UK a strong performance. That was the boom. That is the bust. Basically, everywhere has gone down. Huge reversal in the Baltics, which had done very well in the boom. Poland probably was the only East European country which kept going. Western Europe has dropped off, except Germany, most decentralized, most powerful cities. Southern Europe is in decline, and the UK is a very mixed bag, and the UK core cities are falling behind. So there's the risk already. And this data is, 2010. And we've had 3 years more of this. This is a big deal. This is the social cohesion challenge we're going to face. If I look about, what are people doing and saying about it, actually, there's very little debate in most European countries about this question of where should we invest. Mostly, people just spend the money on the capital because it's easy, it's simple, and it goes without saying. The bar to justify investment in the Olympics is much lower to justify the investment in HS2. Always is. Some people focus on cohesion, but increasingly there's a concern about economic performance, not at the expense of cohesion, but because it's one of the potential ways of addressing it. Some national governments have begun to focus on those drivers, innovation, quality, capital, diversity, and begun to think, where should we spend the money to get the long-term benefits? And are beginning to say, like in Romania, like in Poland, very centralized countries, we can't go on like this. We have to diversify, we have to spread the wealth, we've got to get more successful places. Otherwise, the economy will go down, we'll all fall behind. And so, again, my two mandates of the countries which are more decentralized and deconcentrate investment simply did better. Okay? These are complex relationships. I'm grossly oversimplifying them. But I think I've got as good an evidence base for saying that as the agglomeration economists who say, invest in the capital because you've got to have that to drive the economy. So, answer, it's not a conflict between Dublin and the rest, it's win-win, not zero-sum. Yeah? There are diseconomies of scale in line capital cities where second-tier cities can pick up some of the slack and take off some of the pressure. They could absorb some of the overspill. Nobody wants to artificially limit the capital. It is the golden goose. Dublin is and London is and Paris is. It's not about that. It's about growing the pie. The number of second-tier cities you can have will vary. If you're a big country, you can have more. If you're an eastern country where all the growth is in the capital, you've got to take your time. You can't do it overnight. But the policy aim, and I didn't hear anything from the Minister, the policy aim of government should be to maximise the number of high-performing second-tier cities given the position in which you're in. You need much more systematic policies for second-tier cities. Just ask the question, how would that investment policy in science or technology or education or universities, what would be the territorial impact of that? Just ask the question. And you need to maximise the territorial impact of national policies for competitiveness. I've got 5 more minutes. So the bigger picture, I think, and I said to the European Commission, and it's been taken seriously because they wanted to hear it, because they said, Michael, all these East European countries say we have to invest in the capital. Can't you show them as another way? I can say, well, there's some evidence. I say that to the UK government, said, Michael, thank you very much. And they now say, we're doing all this stuff because Michael says so, blah, blah, blah. My simple message is, decentralise responsibilities and resources. Don't just pass the buck, you have to pass the money, and deconcentrate investment. You need territorial economic governments at scale. You need to manage yourself at the functional urban region. Cork is doing it voluntarily. Good, must try harder. You need more financial innovation, greater transparency in territorial investment strategies, mainstream money, and basically invest in the second-tier cities when, under these 3 conditions, the gap between the capital and the second tiers is big and growing, where the second tiers are weak. They have a weak business infrastructure because of historic underinvestment, and there are negative externalities. So what's this all mean to folks in the room today? 4 slides, I think, 2 on Ireland, 2 on Cork. The urban issues for Ireland, it has gone in your and my lifetime from a Celtic tiger to recession in a highly centralised economy and country. Its advantages, it is the gateway to Europe, it does have low corporation tax, it is highly educated, but it is overly centralised and underdeveloped. It has a highly centralised system which is changing but only slightly slowly. Dublin is dominant politically, economically and culturally. National policies for cities are not well integrated, they're divided, the Minister told you so. You've had a localised planning system and a kind of a tax incentive system. A localised planning and weak national planning. So in a sense, you've just let it rip, and you've got sprawl, and now you pay the price. And your colleague from Victoria Gasteiz was saying, we don't do that. We don't do that. So when the minister said, well, it's all very difficult, well, they do it. Tax incentives, obviously, before the bust have incentivised physical development. And at the end of the day, for historic reasons, as we say, local authorities in this country have got far too few powers and resources to deliver. Germany is successful cities, successful powers. My message to the national government, cities matter, so support them. Let me remind you, I'm not an economist, competitiveness, cohesion, livability, sustainability, they're all different sides of that coin. You start with the big city region. Placemaking is a real asset, you're good at that. Encourage local leadership, think about city regions, new financial instruments because the public sector is broken, more contractual working, partnership, blah, blah, very nice, get it nailed down into contracts. More government departments need to value cities and much more government collaboration. Okay? My last 2 slides, and I said I'd stop at 10 to, I've got 1 minute. 2. Chair's nightmare. The achievements. Well done, Cork. Well done. Thank you for helping my argument. Because why go across Europe and say, well, for instance, Munich, oh, well, that's a big city. Barcelona, oh, well, that's very special. Cork, that's interesting. The economic driver of the Southwest. Of course it's benefited from Europe. Of course it's benefited from a sustained strategy from FDI and internationalisation, and Pat Leverage tells me greatly about this. You've got a better balanced, high value-added economy, better than any other Irish city. It's better balanced. Dublin's too much on financial services. You've got manufacturing, high-tech, public sector. You've got the right mix. you've got a young, well-educated workforce, and it goes without saying, you've got a very strong third sector in this room today. Huge commitment, huge energy, huge passion. The point is to channel and connect to the economic drivers. I think you played a limited hand very well. Given it's a weak local authority, it has to kind of, move that way. It's been very, very good indeed. It's developed the place quality assets. People like to live somewhere. It matters. There's a lot of argument about how much a place matters. People go to a place not because it's nice, but to get a job. But they stay in a place because it's nice. If you think just making it nice, you'll get highly educated people to come to Cork because it's down the road and they've got coastal, forget it. But if you get them here and they say, it's bloody great, family love it, kids love it, I'm not going back. Anyway, I think you've had good leadership. I think you've had good city council leadership. City council stuff in Ireland is dreadful. I think you've tried very hard. The Cork Area Strategic Plan was ahead of its time. I know they often remain at level of plans, but my sense is they do try hard. I've talked to some of the private sector here. I think that public-private triple helix partnership is okay here. And I say I think your regional policies, I think you do have some self-confidence. See, you're real Scousers, you know it. I talked to Dan Ball yesterday. I said, so tell me, Dan, I wouldn't want to accuse a Cork man of false modesty. No, don't go there. And I do think you've kept your eye on the ball. I think my drivers of competitiveness, I have to tell Pat, I invented them on the back of an envelope the night before I saw John Prescott. I said, John, these are the 6 things that make cities successful. And I wrote it down, and people now say, that's true. So he wrote it down, and now it informs all his strategies. But it is true. I do think you've systematically looked at those things. Okay, what's for you? The challenges. Because you've got a dual economy, social exclusion is large. This is a 2-track city, you know that. We're all staying in the Clarion. I've never stayed in a provincial hotel in my life, and I've lived in America, where I've met so many Americans away. That is the dual economy. I haven't been shown your bad parts yet, but in a sense what is happening is that bit of the economy is okay. The problem is that gap is not sustainable. In a boom, it's okay. Yeah? So that dependence on FDI is something you've got to think about. Yeah? Clearly you've done well county-city relationships, but suburbanisation, economic investment beyond the city centre is a risk. I know Pat and Anne Bogan are focusing very high on this, but you've got to keep the city centre alive. It had a good period, it's probably a little bit tired. You need to reinvest in that and not let stuff get dragged down. You don't want to stop good stuff, and you can't always get exactly where you want it, but you must get that spatial balance right. Connectivity, well, you're dominated by cars. That's not your problem. The way public transport in this country, its responsibility is shambles. You can't be blamed in a way. But it does raise your sustainability. Again, Jose's put it on the table. Clusters and linkages, they need to mature and deepen. Territorial governance needs to be sorted, and the impact of the crisis you've got to look at. So I think what your story is for other places, and I think Jose gave you some very important stories from Victoria Gasteiz. Your messages, which I've used and I believe are true and powerful, is Cork has shown that even when you have limited powers and resources, good, strategic, political, visionary leadership can make a difference. Secondly, I do think that European policies have been crucial. Raising the bar, raising standards, challenging and paying. And I thirdly think that decentralisation and deconcentration are necessary, desirable, and of course the Minister always buggers off before I give my talk, but I would have said, more please Minister. Thanks very much.